Namaste, aloha. My name is Janapati Das. Thank you for tuning in to the Bhagavad Gita as it is class. I am very happy to see you and appreciate your time and effort coming and listening to the reading through of this wonderful treatise of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. At this moment I would like to offer my respects to you. Thank you. Like to also offer my respectful obeisances unto Jagat Guru Siddhaswarapananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, our dear spiritual master, and our spiritual grandfather A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As instructed by our great spiritual masters and our lineage of spiritual masters, we should chant. As also instructed by the Supreme Lord, Lord Chaitanya, chant the names of Krishna. Hari Nama, Hari Nama, Hari Nama. So please join along. Namo Siddhaswarapananda Param Sanamine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Prastaya Namo Siddhaswarapananda Paramahamsa Namine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Prastaya Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivastava Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Vaishya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivastava Gaur Bhakta Hari Bol Adibu. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So welcome again. We are continuing reading through the Transcendental Knowledge of Chapter 4, titled Transcendental Knowledge. And we had last left off at text 28. We were reading about the different kinds of sacrifices that the living entities do. And as all based on this verse earlier on, as the spirit souls surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. All men follow my path, right? Which Krishna was telling Arjuna, that the living entities surrender to Krishna, surrender to God in different degrees. So, in other words, the reward of what Krishna is giving them is based a lot on what their consciousness is like. This is really about consciousness, Krishna consciousness, and consciousness of God. How much do we want to surrender? How much do we want to be God in this world? Text 28. Dravya yajnas tapo yajna yoga yajnas tata pare svaryaya gana yajnascha yatayaha shamshita vrataha dravya yajna, sacrificing one's possessions. Tapo yajna, sacrifice in austerities. Yoga yajna, sacrifice in eightfold mysticism. Tata, thus, apare, others. Swadhyaya, sacrifice in the study of the Vedas. Gana yajna, sacrifice in advancement of transcendental knowledge. Cha, also. Yatayaha, enlightened. Shamshita, taken to strict vrata, vows. Translation: though there are others who, enlightened by sacrificing their material possessions and in severe austerities, take strict vows and practice the yoga of eightfold mysticism, and others study the Vedas for the advancement of transcendental knowledge. Purport: these sacrifices may be fitted into various divisions. There are persons who are sacrificing their possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. In India, the rich mercantile community or princely orders open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Anakakshetra, Atiti Shala, Anatalyaya, Vijapita, etc. So I don't know anything about these charitable institutions, but maybe I'll look them up and do a little research on them. In other countries, too, there are many hospitals, old age homes, and similar charitable foundations meant for distributing food, education, and medical treatment free to the poor. All these charitable activities are called Dravya Maya Yajna. There are others who, for higher elevation in life or for promotion to higher planets within the universe, voluntarily accept many kinds of austerities, such as Chandrayana and Chaturmasya. Once again, some things I'm not very familiar with, so I won't speak about that. But what I can say is that there are different varieties of sacrifice, and just because we stress that the highest form of sacrifice is Sankirtan Yajna, right? Christian chanting of Krishna's names, sacrifice, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be charitable. In fact, to be charitable is better than to be a complete materialist, selfish, self-centered person. And there are different varieties of sacrifices because they involve sacrifice to give your time, your money, effort, so that other living entities are comfortable as well. They're not suffering materially, which is a good thing. We should definitely practice self service for others. Because we, by nature, because we're the servants of Krishna, we have the tendency to want to serve, or we either want to serve, or if we're more materialist, we will serve in order to obtain certain things, which is not a really as elevated version of sacrifice. But as a devotee of Krishna, knowing that Krishna is the goal of all sacrifices, we do service, we help others, we help other living entities in service as a form of service to Krishna. These processes entail severe austerity. So these are Chandra, Yana, and Chaturmasya. These processes entail severe vows for conducting life under certain rigid rules. For example, under Chaturmasya vow, the candidate does not shave for 4 months during the year. Get pretty hairy. July to October. He does not eat certain foods, does not eat twice in a day, and does not leave home. Such sacrifice of the comforts of life is called tapomaya yajna. There are still others who engage themselves in different kinds of mystic yogas, like the Patanjali system for merging into the existence of the Absolute, or Hatha Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga for particular perfections. And the Ashtanga Yoga is the 8-limbed yoga. We talked about that. I think one of these times I have a breakdown from a godbrother of mine about the different purposes of niyama yama, asana, pratyahara, pranayam, dhyana, dharana, and samadhi, the 8 limbs of yoga that were practices, most likely practiced in previous ages as a form of sacrifice. That's a whole other thing we could do and complete a different class about that, I think. It's not like a lot of yogas will term themselves as being Ashtanga Yoga, whatever that means. There's some kind of Hatha Yoga that they do, the 8 limbs of yoga. And a lot of times it's incorrect. And some travel to all the sanctified places of pilgrimage. All these practices are called yoga yajna, sacrifice for a certain type of perfection in the material world. There are others who engage themselves in the studies of different Vedic literatures, specifically the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras, or the Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy was philosophy instructed by the incarnation of Godhead in the form of Kapila Dev, who instructed his mother in the Sankhya philosophy, his mother Devahuti. And this is a story in the Srimad Bhagavatam. All of these are called Svadhyaya Yajna, or engagement in the sacrifice of studies. All these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. So the reality is that at the root of doing the sacrifice, generally people are trying to seek a higher elevation of consciousness in one way or another, and so that's a good thing. Should always seek to take a higher status of life. Christian consciousness is, however, different from these because it is a direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above mentioned types of sacrifices, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotee. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. So one cannot, it's sort of an indirect way. You can elevate your consciousness, but you don't really come to the goal by doing that directly. Text 29. Apane juvati pranam prane panam tata pare pranapanagati rudra pranayama parayanaha apare niyata hara pranan praneshu juvati. Apane, air which acts downward. Juvati offers. Pranam, air which acts outward. Prane, the air going outward. Apanam, air going downward. Tata, as also. Apare, others. Prana, air going outward. Apana, air going downward. Gati, movement. Rudva, checking. Pranayam, trance induced by stopping all breathing. Palayana, so inclined. Apare, others. Niyata, controlled. Aharaha, eating. Pranan, outgoing air. Praneshu, in the outgoing air. Juvati, sacrifices. Translation, and there are even others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, and they practice stopping the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Some of them curtailing the eating process, offering the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. So those are pranayama practices. Those are really very difficult to do, actually, nowadays. So Krishna is outlining a bunch of different practices and whatnot, but he will come to a conclusion that Bhakti Yoga is the best out of all, that you can abandon all the these varieties of paths, and just surrender to him. Purport: the system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama, and in the beginning it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. So there's asanas, and which are seating postures, different movements, right, like Hatha Yoga. And then there's pranayama, which involves use pranayama in asanas, but you can also be sitting and doing different kinds of pranayama breathings. This practice involves controlling the air within the body to enable simultaneous passage in opposite directions. The apana air goes downward and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized into puraka equilibrium. Similarly, when the exhale breathing is offered to the inhale breathing, it is called rechaka. When both the air currents are completely stopped, it is called kumbhaka yoga. By practice of kumbhaka yoga, the yogis increase the duration of life by many, many years. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always situated in transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. His senses, being always engaged in the service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So I love how Bhaktivedanta keeps bringing this back, because Krishna is laying out all these things, and I don't know a lot about pranayama. I'm not a pranayama master or anything like that, so I only know a little bit, that the body has different life airs, and the living entity is situated between the life airs, and it has a lot to do with the prana, or the life force, which is known as prana in Sanskrit, is known as chi, and but like I said, I'm not a real master in all this, so I'm not really going to speak about those kind of things. The most important thing is Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada says, just like in the Ashtanga yoga system, there are these steps that you would take if you just surrender to Krishna and chant Krishna's names and follow your spiritual masters. But naturally, all these, you'll attain good qualities by default. You don't have to take the steps, purifying, doing the yamas and purifying yourself, and watching what you're saying, and then doing sitting postures and breathing postures and focusing the mind on things and trying to take all the steps of the Ashtanga system, or trying to do pranayama, or just be a perfection in asanas. That's not really necessary at all. So that's what Bhaktivedanta was saying, that in the end, service to Krishna is really the goal. So a lot of times people will get hung up on these, I can control my life airs, I can merge into the Brahman effulgence, I can do all these things, I'm a yogi, I can bend myself into pretzels, and I have a really fit, and I have a very strong sex drive for women, yoga students who come and are attracted to my body. these are ways of getting completely distracted of the point. Why we had an Ashtanga yoga system was to come to know Krishna ultimately. But this is what Bhaktivedanta said, especially in this age of Kali. We take the sacrifice that has been recommended to us, which is chanting Krishna's names. It's not that it's not a bad thing to do yoga and to take care of it, and do breathing practices and all these things to maintain good health, so that you can use your body in the service of Krishna. But we can see how easily this has been perverted and by so-called Hatha yogis and whatnot, for wrong conclusions. So at the end of life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Yeah, so the point being is that even if we are perfectionists in all these different steps, at the time of death, they're all gonna be gone. And maybe we'll reach our goal of coming to Krishna consciousness, and eventually, maybe we won't. Most likely we won't. We'll get distracted by things. And so, whereas a little service done to Krishna is never wasted. So consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation. So these things happen by default. A Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage, and he is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna prasadam, or food which is first offered to the Lord. This helps control your tongue. I remember I used to eat much more. My tongue was kind of just attracted to eating a lot more, and when I would I would eat 3 plates of prasadam, and the more and more I ate prasadam, the less I found I was eating it, because I didn't need to eat so much. But of course, it's not a bad thing to eat lots of prasadam, but the idea of eating food, as for the sake of sense gratification. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control. It's also very good for your health to not be eating so much. And without sense control, there is no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. Text 30. Sarvi piyete yajna vido yajna kapshita kalmashaha yajna shishamrita bujo yanti brahma sanatanam. Save, all, api, although apparently different, ete, all these, yajna vidya, conversant with the purpose of performing, yajna, sacrifices, kapshita, kashapita, being cleansed of the result of such performances, kalamashaha, sinful reactions, yajna shishta, as a result of such performances of yajna, amrita, hold on a minute, make sure I'm this, yeah, make sure I wasn't on the wrong verse here. Amrita Bhuja, those who have tasted such nectar, Yanti, do approach, Brahma, the supreme, Sanatanam, eternal atmosphere. Translation, all these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice have become cleansed of sinful reaction, and having tasted the nectar of the remnants of such sacrifice, they go to the supreme eternal atmosphere. Purport. From the foregoing explanation of different types of sacrifice, namely sacrifices of one's possessions, study of the Vedas or philosophical doctrines, and performance of the yoga system, it is found that the common aim of all is to control the senses. Sense gratification is the root cause of material existence. Therefore, unless and until one is situated on a platform apart from sense gratification, there is no chance of being elevated to the eternal platform of full knowledge, full bliss, and full life. This platform is in the eternal atmosphere, or Brahman atmosphere. All the above mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. By this advancement in life, one not only becomes happy and opulent in this life, but also at the end he enters into the eternal kingdom of God, either merging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Text 31. Nayam lokasti ayajnasya kuto naya kuru satama. Na, never. Ayam, this. Lokaha, planet. Asti, there is. Ayajnasya, of the foolish. That's interesting. Kuchta, where is. Anya, the other. Kuru satama, O best among the Kurus. So, it's interesting because Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada translates the word ayajnasya, of the foolish. And here in his translation, he says, O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. Then, what then of the next? So the person, ayajnasya, when we put a in front, it's the opposite. So a person who is engaging in sacrifices, the person who is not engaging in sacrifices, without the sacrifices, this person will never live happy on this planet nor in this life. And what then of the next? So many people, although they're engaging in many material type of sacrifices for material gain, they're not really engaging in any kind of spiritual sacrifice, and they will never be satisfied or happy with the things that they do in this life. They'll be actually frustrated. Purport: whatever form of material existence one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. In other words, existence in the material world is due to the multiple reactions to our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's dragging on in material existence. So this is what we've been reading about. We are ignorant of our true identity, and therefore we think ourselves to be the body, and thinking that if we engage in material sense enjoyment, this will bring us satisfaction. But it is actually the cause of more and more sin, more and more karmic reaction heaped upon us, and that comes from ignorance. And the sinful life is what keeps us in this material world. The human form of life is the only loophole by which one may get out of this entanglement. The Vedas therefore give us a chance for escape by pointing out the paths of religion, economic comfort, regulated sense gratification, and at last the means to get out of the miserable condition entirely. The path of religion, or the different kinds of sacrifice recommended above, automatically solves our economic problems. By performance of yajna, we can get enough food, enough milk, etc., even if there is so-called increase of population. When the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. The Vedas prescribe, therefore, a sacred marriage for regulated sense gratification. Thereby, one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from the material bondage, and the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna, sacrifice, as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to the Vedas, how can he expect a happy life? There are different grades of material comforts in different heavenly planets, and in all cases there is immense happiness for persons engaged in different kinds of yajna, but the highest kind of happiness that a man can achieve is to be promoted to the spiritual planets by practice of Krishna consciousness. A life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all the problems of material existence. Yes, it's true. So other sacrifices, they are in different kinds of consciousness. When you look at the different scriptures of the world, the Quran, the Torah, they have the Old Testaments, they have rules and regulations and ways of the Quran will have, how many wives you should marry and what you should do and what to do with your animals, livestock, and how to do business and all these kinds of things. That's the economic development in these Vedas. So the Vedic system is similar too. It had all kinds of rules and regulations of regulating your life according to what God's plan, with the pinnacle of being coming back to a loving relationship with Krishna. But they had everything under the sun for the people who were in lower and lower stages of consciousness, who wanted to engage in, lots of materialistic lifestyle, but were still allowed to be able to be regulated. Now that's kind of pretty much thrown out in Kali Yuga. We don't have that kind of system, and I think religions are trying to do that, but people are like, oh, religion is outdated. We should just be able to do whatever we want to do. Text 32. But Evam bahu vija yajna vitata brahmano mukhe karma jan vidi tan sarvan evam ganatva vimokshashe evam. Thus bahu vijaha, various kinds of yajna, sacrifices, vitaha, widespread, brahmanaha, of the Vedas, mukhe, in the face of, karma jan, born of work, vidi, you should know, tan, then, sarvan, all, evam, thus, janatva, knowing, vimokshashe, be liberated. Translation, text 32. All these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as much, you will be liberated. So the Vedas are not a normal, they are written down because of Srila Vyasadeva wrote them down in the Kali Yuga age, but they're eternal. They're the source from, they are the incarnation of Krishna, the Vedas, so therefore they are non-different than Krishna, and they have spiritual purposes at different degrees for different kinds of people. So, and they said all of them are born of different kinds of work, right? Different work, different kinds of modes of material nature. Different types of sacrifices, as discussed above, are mentioned in the Vedas to suit the different types of worker. Because men are so deeply absorbed in the bodily concept, these sacrifices are so arranged that one can work either with the body, the mind, or the intelligence. But all of them are recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. This is confirmed by the Lord here from his own mouth. So we have other scriptures from different religions that sometimes you're wondering, why is there this contradiction? Why is Jesus, why does the Vedic civilization reject eating meat but not yet do it? Or then they had animal sacrifices in the Bible, and it's stated right here that there are people in different kinds of consciousness and they do particular types of work. Like the example I use all the time is the Hebrew people coming out of Egypt, who had been in captivity without any kind of rules or regulations. They were in a pagan society. I don't even think, maybe they followed the Egyptian religion, maybe not. But the point is that when they came out and they were led in the desert, Moses had to, Yahweh, Krishna, basically had to give them these particular rules and regulations to follow that were very, very specific, like types of temple worship, animal sacrifices burned or prepared in a certain way, and only certain people could do that, and you could only marry certain kinds of people, and all these kinds of rules and regulations in the, I think it's Numbers or something. There's all these, you can go there are all these specifics that were laid out, and this is exactly what's being talked about here. The Vedas were the same way. Shreyan, text 33. Shreyan Dravyamayad Yajnyaj yajna parantapa sarvam karma kilyam partha kane parisham shamapayate Sreyan greater Ravyamayat than the sacrifice of material possessions. Yajna, knowledge. Jnana yajna, sacrifice in knowledge. Palan tapa, O chastiser of the enemy. Sharam, all karma activities. Akhilam, in totality. Partha, O son of Prita. Ganane, in knowledge. Parishama payate, in enzin. Translation, text 33. O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice of knowledge is greater than the sacrifice of material possessions. O son of Prita, after all, the sacrifice of work culminates in transcendental knowledge. Purport. The purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. Say that again. Read that again. That's a good point. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. So, people, once again, going back to the point of the sacrifices that people have to take sometimes in a particular consciousness and faith is different than the one who is a pure devotee or, very elevated devotee. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who are simply sacrificing material possessions without such knowledge. This is brought up because Arjuna wanted to sacrifice the kingdom, of our access to the kingdom, or fighting in a battle, so he could go off and be a yogi in the forest and renounce his material possessions and just raise his life air and whatnot. But the point that Krishna was making about what is real renunciation, that's a very key thing. Real renunciation means to utilize everything that you have in your possession by happenchance, by the karmic that has come of our own accord, is what the Bhagavad Gita was saying earlier. We are satisfied with what we've received because of karmic reactions or what our Krishna's mercy, and we utilize those strengths, the personality types, our talents, our money, our time, our body, everything in the service of Krishna. So Krishna was making this point to Arjuna that you are a great warrior and you are my devotee, and I would like you to be a renunciate and not be attached to the results of whether you're going to win or lose the battle, and anyway, more and more we went through all this stuff too, and the real reason that these people on the battlefield are not actually their bodies, and nor are you. You're actually my eternal servants, so you should be doing my eternal bidding. When one's faith reaches the transcendental knowledge, the performance of the sacrifice should be considered more advanced than those who are simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. Without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. So that was what Krishna was stressing, and Bhaktivedanta so beautifully says it here, that even though you think you're doing something spiritual, I'm doing this for you, God, kind of thing, but it's kind of my way of doing it, it doesn't really have any spiritual benefit because you're really just doing it for yourself. It's not easy. It's like you're doing it yourself as your own God, I think I know what's going to be really great for my service to God, or my service to my spiritual master. And the spiritual master, being a representative of Krishna, will often see through this, because a devotee, a disciple, or a student will say, I've got this great idea of how I can serve you, and the spiritual master says, no, I don't want you to do that. And then they get angry, because why won't you let me do what I'm really good at? It's like, I'm a great musician, or I'm a great, writer. You're making me do this other thing. No one's making you do anything. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness. The highest stage of transcendental knowledge Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruit of activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge. Okay, nice. Text 34. Tajvidi prani patena pariprashnena sevaya upade kshanti te ganana gananyanas tattva darshina. That knowledge by different sacrifices. Vidi, try to understand. Prani patena, by approaching a spiritual master. Pari prashnena, by submissive inquiries. Sevaya, by rendering of service. Upade kashanti, initiate te, unto you. Gananam, knowledge. Gananyana, the self-realized tattva, truth. Darshina, the seers. So we come to our absolutely crucial verse. Oh, I love quoting this, because it's a really a substantial verse. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. And I think that's so beautiful to see that in relation to all these types of sacrifices, and the sacrifice of knowledge. When we sacrifice our own preconceived notions to the greater knowledge of our spiritual master and Krishna and our spiritual master is non-different. What is coming from Krishna, what is coming from our spiritual master is the same. So to know the absolute truth, to know the absolute knowledge, you must approach a spiritual master in a humble state of mind, submissively, and you render service unto him. In the self-realized soul, the spiritual master can impart knowledge, the absolute knowledge, unto you because he has seen the truth. By engaging in the same activity that you are doing, by surrendering to a spiritual master and inquiring from him and applying in his life. Purport: the path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. Yes. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession and from the Lord himself. You cannot make your way. Why we pray, I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. That is a statement like being in the material world, like a cave, lost in the forest somewhere, and the spiritual master at night comes with the absolute knowledge as a torchlight. It says, follow this light. Follow me out of this material world. And because spiritual life is undoubtedly difficult, to try to get out, to try to know the absolute truth without a spiritual master is almost impossible, if not impossible. So many people claim to be spiritual masters who never had a spiritual master. They're just happy to be a guru, and they've read the Bible or they've read the Quran, and they interpret it from their own mind, and a lot of times way off the mark. And then you try to say, well, who's your spiritual master? And they're like, well, Jesus Christ. Who's your living spiritual master? And they say, Jesus Christ. Well, Jesus Christ is my spiritual master too, but who is your living spiritual master? We don't need a spiritual master. We have Jesus Christ. It's, anyway, that's a whole other thing. Born again Christians or born again religionists, fundamentalists, they don't want to hear anything but what they think is the truth. The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. So we say we have a line of spiritual masters teaching exactly the same thing that Krishna taught to the sun god so many years ago, taught to Arjuna. That's being taught in the Srimad Bhagavatam by different spiritual masters, Sutta Goswami or Shukadev Goswami to King Parikshit, or Bhaktivedanta to Jagaguru to Janapati Das. This is always the same no matter what the day and age. It's not something that we're speculating about or coming up with or creating ourselves or thinking that, well, this is what the Bhagavad Gita, everything I've learned from my spiritual master. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process. So there's plenty of that, where people just go and they take a couple yoga workshops in Bali, spend a couple $1,000s, and they're taught something that people have created online, and they become a guru on TikTok, and they're, there's so many of these people. They're like this Swami or that Swami or Star Crystal or whatever. They are not spiritually realized by magic. They've been manufacturing their own process. This is exactly what Krishna was telling Arjuna. You're speculating. You're saying, this is what I think. I'm telling you what it is. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna does call this his opinion, but Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the source of all knowledge. And therefore, when he says it is his opinion, it is the absolute truth. There is no other absolute truth. The Bhagavatam says, so it's really, the point I wanted to bring up here is when you're trying to find a spiritual teacher, it's a very crucial thing to do. And you have to listen to the Lord in your heart. And you have to check Scripture, and you have to listen to what they're saying. And if they're contradicting what's in Scripture and what you're feeling that doesn't quite jive in the Lord in my heart, you shouldn't be following these people, because there's plenty of people who will lead you to the path of hell with their little, was that the Pied Piper who led all the children out of in that fairy tale. Just play them out and they lead to hell. So the Bhagavatam says, Dharmam hi shakshad bhagavad pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated. Oh yeah, I was going to read the rest of the line. Let's just back up a little bit. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. Those people that want to be gurus, they want people to admire them and just write in their comment section how wonderful they are, and how enlightened they are and how beautiful they are, and thank you for helping me. The Bhagavatam says, Dharmam hi shakshad bhagavad pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help one's progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination of spiritual understanding, as we see in the situation with Arjuna and Krishna. Arjuna submitted his questions. He submitted himself humbly to the service of Krishna by listening to Krishna about the absolute truth. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. One should not only hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind towards the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries become perfect. Okay, and I'm going to read this text 35 because it goes well with the text 34. Yajkanadvapna punar modam evam yashyashi pandava yenna bhutani ashe shani dalakshashi atamani atomai yat, which ganadva, knowing, na, never, punaha, again, moham, illusion, evam, like this, yashyashi, you shall go. Pandava, O son of Pandu, Yena, by which, Bhutani, all living entities, Asheshani, totally, Dalakshashi, you will see, Atmani, in the Supreme Soul, Ato, or in other words, Mai, in me. Translation, text 35, and when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all living beings are but part of me, and they are in me and are mine. I want to read those two verses together because they go together so wonderfully. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. And when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all living beings are part of me, and that they are in me and are mine. Krishna, I am yours. Krishna, you are mine. That's just a wonderful prayer to say, and Srila Prabhupada says it. You should say that. Dear Lord Sri Krishna, Krishna, I am yours, and Krishna, you are mine. Purport: the results of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. So knowing that is like half the battle. Knowing you're not your body and you're not your mind is so relieving of anxiety, relieving of fear, of the great illusion and ignorance about life. And then knowing that I am the Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit soul, I am an eternal spark of Krishna, and all my brothers and sisters in the universe, in all the universes, lost in this material world and in the spiritual world, are sparks of Krishna, and we're all related to Krishna in love. Krishna is the supreme father, friend, lover, dearest well-wisher. And to know that is to know the absolute truth. There's nothing else to be gained, nothing else to worry about. The sense of the separated existence from Krishna is called Maya. Ma, not ya. This, not this. Not this. Not this. Not this. Not that. Some think that we have nothing to do with Krishna, that Krishna is only a great historical personality, and that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna, the great white light, ocean of light off the body of Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of everything. When they say, Nicha Nichanam Chaitana Chaitanash. Chaitana. I think that was it. Krishna, God is one. God is the cause of everything. In the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. And so for a really wonderful dive into Mayavadi philosophy and personalism, we have been reading through the Sri Ishopanishad, so I recommend reading that or going through my classes. I've done 7 of the mantras so far. The Mayavadi, let's see here. Even the million of incarnations are only his different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experienced in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its own original identity. So, yeah, we've talked about this before. If you have a piece of paper and you tear it up, it starts to lose its mass and its volume, and it becomes spread out all over the place. In fact, the piece of paper has a limited amount of space or volume that, when distributed, it's no longer there. But Krishna is not a material item. 1 + 1 is 1. He's eternal. So when we say that the fragmented living entities are the parts and parcels, doesn't mean that Krishna is any less because of our existence as sparks of Krishna. But when the Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that the absolute means that 1 + 1 is equal to 1, as Bhaktivedanta saying that, and that 1 - 1 is also equal to 1, this is the case in the absolute world, the spiritual world. For want of sufficient knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion, and therefore we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless different, not different from him. So our separation from Krishna, so-called separation, is not real separation. Krishna is with us. Krishna is always with us. It is because we have chosen to turn our back to Krishna that we do not see Krishna. We do not experience Krishna. But once we have the desire in our heart, Krishna, please come into my heart. It's like then we begin to, again, experience Krishna's closeness. And although we are separate parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless different, not different from him. The bodily difference of the living entities is Maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By Maya alone, Arjuna thought that this temporary bodily relationship with his kinsman was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted towards this end, that a living being as his eternal servitor cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being an identity apart from Krishna is called Maya. The living entities as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul, Krishna, is the supreme shelter for all living entities, and giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate identity. Thus, under different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, it is to be understood that they are on the path of liberation, as confirmed in the Bhagavatam, Muktir Hidvanyata Rupam Svarupena Vayabhyashtiti. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as the eternal servitor of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. Beautiful. Just wonderful. So we're going to end it off there. Thank you very much. See you next time. Namaste.